Leigh Brown. This is crazy shit in real estate. Today, we're going to talk distressed commercial real estate. I know, right? It's like your favorite topic ever. But Jake Harris is with me. You're going to enjoy the conversation. You're going to learn a lot. And actually, we disagree on some things. So buckle up, get ready to pick a side, and I'll see you on the other side. You're listening to Crazy Shit in Real Estate. You'll be amazed at all these wild but true situations that others have found themselves in. Because on this show, you'll hear uncensored, unbelievable stories from the world of real estate. I'm Leigh Brown. Let's dive right in. Before you get the rest of the story, I'd love to share a quick message from today's sponsor. If you've never heard of Follow Up Boss, you're going to love it. And it's going to get you organized in a way that will actually impact your business for profitability and for better excellence with those you're serving. For more information, go to followupboss.com/crazy. Hello, Jake Harris.
Hello. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. How are you?
Fantastic as well. Is it Leigh or Leia or?
Keep
Leigh?
I
don't know. Leigh. Okay. Just Leigh. Okay.
Just Leigh. Leighs are what they wear in Hawaii, and that's Leia. And Leia would be Leia, and that's Carrie Fisher. And so I'm just Leigh. But not Leigh like the jeans. That's how boys spell it. This is how girls spell it.
Okay. That makes sense. Like General Lee, but like you're like Empress Lee.
Dodge Charger, man. That's a great car. Actually, it wasn't a Charger. That was a Challenger.
Yeah, it was a Challenger. And what part of the country are you in?
I'm in Concord, North Carolina. But, sadly, you can't drive the General Lee or even have that horn anymore because you'd be crucified for it. But that was a great show, man.
I know. It was, them good old boys.
What I really wanted was Boss Hogg's car because he had that big white Lincoln and it had the long horns on the hood. That's what I want. That's a real hood ornament.
Which is interesting. My dad loved that show. And so we had a boat that he named the Boss Hogg. And he got some of those big old horns and we had them above our fireplace when I was a kid growing up. He used those Texas longhorns. So yes, I was familiar with that as a kid growing up and what, Boss Hogg. My dad was a police officer. And so.
Oh, so he was horrified by Roscoe P. Coltrane because Roscoe was not a great sheriff's deputy, to be honest.
Let's just say most police officers that have been on television shows probably have not been the epitome of the best of policing and legal work, Barney Fife and others. So,
well, now be careful. You can't talk about the Andy Griffith Show because that's North Carolina. That was in the town of Mount Airy. And you can still go to Floyd's Barbershop where it has 2 chairs, no waiting.
Really?
Yeah, it's really fun. They do the Autumn Leaves Festival in Mount Airy every year in October. And you have all of the Mayberry memorabilia still there. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
I think most of the people are dead now, but Andy Griffith was one of the most prominent alumni ever from Chapel Hill. He went to Carolina.
Interesting.
Now, where did you grow up? Where are you located now?
I grew up most of my life in this area. I have come back to Northern California, just beside Sacramento, kind of in the foothills, heading up towards Tahoe. What's that?
Yeah, Placer, Roseville, where are we at?
Yeah, Placer County and Roseville.
So do you know my good friends, the Ostrom, Steve and Heather? They're with Coldwell Banker.
I don't think I know them.
Oh, you need to know them. They're amazing. And Heather is obsessed with skeletons. And so they do the best skeleton stuff at Halloween.
Okay.
Plus, they're really amazing realtors and amazing humans, too, with these really creative and cool kids. But she's really known for the skeletons at Halloween. You need to know Heather. So she's, I think, Rockland and Roseville on Instagram, or Roseville and Rockland, but y'all could be friends. And then Julie Patterson is in Placer County. Do you know Julie?
That name sounds familiar.
She's a beautiful blonde, and she's been a realtor for like 24 years. She's Julee, and she's one of my Girl Squad people. I love her. I'm so lucky to know so many great people out there, but you're in such a big realtor market. You don't even get to know all the great realtors, but now you can connect.
That's true. And I did a lot of transactions in this area for a while, but we did so many of them internally. And then most of my stuff in the last 7-8 years has been outside of California. It's been in Texas. And, I had a property in Concord, North Carolina. I never saw it, but yeah, we did a pretty sizable flip operation, and we did investments in 23 states.
Nice. When was this? Great Recession?
Yeah, so really focused on '09 until about 2014 in California. Then 2014 to 2020 was kind of more nationwide with heavy concentration in Texas and Georgia. But then we also, started picking up little other markets as well. What we really were trying to do is stay ahead of institutional investors because their cost of capital was so much cheaper and they just had more money. We would maybe be playing with millions. They were playing with billions. And it was just like, I can't win. I keep getting outbid. And it was kind of like just, I don't know, let's say pissing in the wind, it maybe felt good while it was happening, but then all of a sudden all you were doing was getting yourself wet. And so you got bidding them up. And then it was just like unending amounts of money. And so they moved markets. And so instead of fighting them, we just decided to go where they weren't.
Yeah, they're evil, frankly. I'm not a fan of the big money that's behind this ESG movement, the BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. It's insidious. And I really don't think people are in tune to how big of an issue this is. They've stated that their goal is to own 30% of the U.S. housing stock. And I don't think regular people understand how that's going to give them so much power to lever the markets. And like you said, you squeeze out investors, but it squeezes out homeowners. It squeezes out affordable rents. I mean, there's so many consequences of them owning that much. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's what's awesome is selling to them.
Well, that's true. No inspections, no appraisals, cash. It looks easy.
We would do some really great things and do hard work and just hand them off. And to be honest, I mean, they have. And so you say that from insidious from a high level, but it's also like, where's their money? Is like Texas teachers, the teachers pension fund needs a place to make money. And then they're like, we don't think putting it in the stock market and getting a bunch of fees. We think also owning a little portion of America also makes sense. And so it does actually, if you ripple effect, and there's fees, lots of fees being made by these institutional and very sophisticated investors. But I also think that it is overall benefiting the country as a whole. There's definitely markets. Maybe as a realtor, you may not agree this, but it was like when I was in grad school, I did a study on a buy versus rent kind of regression analysis. Mm-hmm. And it actually owning a home is not really a good investment for the vast majority of people because they don't factor in like the taxes and the maintenance bills and all the other things that are related to it. And really what it is a forced savings plan. And so it's just like they're forced to put money into this house that over time has kind of grown with inflation. Had they actually just invested that same amount of money, they would have made way more money investing it somewhere else. But it gave a little bit of continuity or security or other things like that. But the vast majority of the world does not own their own house or own where they live, but they can have some long-term rentals. And I would argue that cities that were designed for humans and not for cars have a higher level of community and connectivity than ones that were built by D.R. Horton and, Pulte and Lennars of the world that were commoditizing the ability to build single family housing.
Well, I would disagree with you on several of those points because I've seen those same regression models, but there is obviously you can make the data say whatever you want it to say, right? So I can make my side look different than you can make your side. But the thing that's seldom accounted for is that you almost need a forced savings plan because Americans have a low savings rate. We have budget leaks with crap like this where people will just go spend unless there's a way for them to save. And we know this because at the average retirement age, and we can use 67 now where Social Security kicks in, someone who's rented their whole life has an average of $4,000 in savings. The person who's owned their home has an average of $200,000. Now, even adjusting for inflation, that means the renter is so far behind, they're either going to have to work forever or rely on the government, which is something we were never intended to do as free individuals, is rely on any kind of a government body to look after us, which is one side of that regressive analysis that gets left out, but also the emotional piece, because you can invest in the stock market all you want, but you can't plant tomato plants in the yard and you can't let your kids get off the school bus there and paint the bedroom because you need to have a different environment. And if you look at the COVID era, I think it really demonstrated how important that sanctuary space is to people because they needed that work from home environment. Kids were schooling from home, and people that didn't have their own space, man, they felt it. And so, of course, it resulted in this big run up, which has been great from an equity standpoint, but also is not sustainable over the long haul. But still, I would make a play for home ownership. And to those cities that are built for people and not cars, I'm just going to say that as somebody who lives in a suburban market, we have a lot of those vinyl villages, the D.R. Horton Pulte neighborhoods. And it's not about the design as much as it is about the attitude of where people live, because I have seen amazing communities built inside these neighborhoods. It just depends on, are people willing to go outside and say hey to each other? Because I find a lot friendlier environment here in Concord than I found when I lived in Manhattan, which is not a car city. That's a people city. And people up there don't want to say hey to you. They would assume run you over as come over and hug your neck. So I think it's about the people, but that's my side.
Agreed. And I don't disagree with any of the points that you made. And I agree that people can't get out of their own way. They will not do. They're predictably irrational. And
100%.
If you look at that, they will absolutely not do what is for their best interest. And that's why it's still believed that home ownership is not the best investment. But because people in that forced saving plans, it is actually how they accumulate some levels of wealth.
Where they may have not many other investment options. It's at least something. So there's that piece.
Yeah. And to the point of community and connectivity is you're absolutely right that people connecting with other people. But I was like, you can actually design that and program it in your architectural design. So like Google does this with their campus and community, is they make it so people have to run into each other. Like they're a little bit tighter, and they design them so that it builds people, they have to talk to each other because they're normally would have their headphones in and just be on a computer. And so they want to engage community. And so it's like from that is not just doing all single family houses that have a straight line in there, but like, how do you mix that community? How do you also have some townhouses? How do you have a community center? How do you have a pool? How do you have, and it's like a mixed use, more thoughtful design that is actually going to engage community. And that's why I particularly love Spanish colonial architecture, is because it was built off of a plaza and a gathering and a community space. And it was about collectively the community coming together. And even though you live 2 streets that way, you're meeting someone that lives 2-3 streets over that other way, because it was forcing almost a connectivity point, because that's where everybody went and gathered and did these other things. Whereas single family houses and the D.R. Hortons and some of the world absolutely can have amazing community because people connected up together, or they're a cul-de-sac. They go sit out in the street and do a fire pit and talk to the neighbors and have a beer. I think that's completely awesome. But how can we also think about that from the architecture and the design from the get-go?
Well, I do think that live, work, play is the concept that a lot of builders are putting forth now, but it's not the same thing as a big city, right? So it's just more about having more activities and businesses and retail and office all within a proximity, which is kind of in between what's being described. And I think they're positive, but I also say there's a generational disconnect, because we have to figure out, you and I are Gen Xers, we have to figure out how these millennials and Zoomers are going to learn how to put these things down and take out their earpods to interact. And I don't know, you can't force that, but they're going to have to embrace this at some point, and they just haven't yet in this era of digital. Although I'm not going to lie, I mean, we're recording this at the end of October. Nothing made me happier than to watch the metaverse valuation implode, because Zuckerberg is all in on that creepy virtual Second Life world. I'm a real life person. I can't stand how people want to digitize everything. So I'm a candidate for live, work, play, to be honest. And it's way better than these little insect pods that are being designed.
Yeah. I was like, I don't,
Oh, did you not look at
I'm on TikTok. I'm on TikTok. My team put me on TikTok, and actually they informed me. I didn't know I was on there. They're like, hey, what are you talking about? Because I said, I'm not on TikTok. And they're like, yes, you are. And I was like,
that's what my team did to me, because I'm like, I'm not into TikTok. And they put me over there. And now I have followers and comments and stuff, and I don't even look at it.
Yeah. And that's what I was like, I don't know. I was like, am I dancing or singing or something? Like, what am I doing? And they're like, no, we're just repurposing some of your content and putting it over. And I was like, all right, whatever. But I was like, but I'm on TikTok. And I was like, so maybe I'm in the metaverse too. And I'm actually really famous in the metaverse. I just have no idea.
It's entirely possible, but nobody has legs in the metaverse. And so I think that's a very weird thing they've set up over there. But, so Catch Knives is your Instagram handle. So you got to tell me why. I got to know that story. Tell me about Catching Knives, Jake.
I wrote a book called Catching Knives, A Guide to Investing in Distressed Commercial Real Estate. I have bought a lot of distressed real estate over the years. And so the origin of that, or at least what I illustrate in the book, is 2007, 2008. I was sitting on a street corner down in Tucson, Arizona, working on a house, and I was crying. And I was praying to the good Lord, can I please be worth no money? $0, like start over. Can I be worth nothing? Because I'd actually had at that point a negative net worth. And not only did I have a negative net worth because of the devaluation of a lot of these assets, I was hemorrhaging money and I was bringing money to the closing table to get out of them and to try to get out from under of this portfolio. I ran out of money before I ran out of, properties. And so then as the values were going down, I'm working. I had good credit prior to that, but so my banks had like auto withdrawal mortgage payments and other things like that. So I had a negative bank account balance. So like, even if I made money, I couldn't even take money to the bank because then they were just like, hey, you're negative $5,000. Thank you very much. Now you're negative $3,000. Like, and so I was like, well, how do I pay bills, to do this and to pay rent and do these, or do anything? And it was just like, I was in just this, very negative abyss of existence and being over levered on a portfolio and then seeing it decline in valuation. And that's where I was just emotionally and just broken. And I was sitting on that street corner and I was crying. And I was just like, I want to be worth nothing. That would just be so much better than where I am in existence. And so on the back of the book, and the reality is the best time to be buying is when there's blood in the streets. And even if the blood is your own blood. And so I was like, I was the epitome of that exact thing. And then it's a cheeky kind of play on financial advice that they tell you to not catch falling knives because you could get cut. Just wait until they fall. So the whole premise is what I was talking about is you need to be able to be prepared and do your homework and have systems to where you can go catch knives. If you have a business plan, I'm saying it's risky to go buy distressed assets, but it can actually give you the greatest generational wealth rocket ship by taking off, by having a business plan, even if it's declining in value. And so my experience is working against or selling off to some of these institutional investors was seeing how they were playing the game, how they were playing it differently than I was, and how they were macro correct and they made billions of dollars. And I was micro correct, and I was really good at saving on maybe the baseboard per linear foot. I saved 25 cents a linear foot on saving the construction. And so I made $200 extra on that individual asset, but they were macro correct and they made $8 billion. And I was like, oh, I'm thinking too small. I'm playing too little. I don't have a model and a system put together. And so the catching knives was, this is how you can actually do that by having and putting together structure and systems and due diligence and things that are then ultimately help prepare you for not being in the situation that I was in. And so that was, I advise people, maybe hindsight. I was talking with another branding group. They said, do you ever have to explain the title? I said, yes, often. And they said, well, maybe on your next one, you won't, win any clever awards, but you'll have some more clarity around it. Because even my wife, she's like, I don't get it. It seems weird. Like it seems violent.
If you've ever wondered why some realtors do more business than others, then you pay attention to them and do what they do. In fact, one of my favorite friends in real estate is Deborah Beagle. She's in the Nashville area, and she will tell you, as managing broker of the Ashton Group, that the agents who join her team on Follow Up Boss are getting an average of 2 homes under contract in the first 90 days. If you want to be like Miss Beagle, go to followupboss.com/crazy. You'll be really glad you checked it out. And frankly, so will your clients, because they'll get to use you and be amazed by your real estate awesomeness. Go to followupboss.com/crazy. But it starts a conversation. And so maybe that's the whole goal, is starting a conversation. So talking about distressed commercial properties, obviously, again, recording this end of October 2022, the commercial market is in what I would just affectionately call purgatory right now, because nobody really knows. Is it going to go back up as people come back to office? Is it going to go up as we see repurposing of commercial space into residential uses? Is it going to go down in the interim? Is it just zip code by zip code, market by market? I'd love to know what criteria you're looking at when you look at these properties, because the thing you should all know if you're watching and listening to this is there is no way to time the market. If anybody could time it, we'd all make a fortune and get in and get out. So you have to always assume that wherever you buy, it could go down, it could go sideways, it could go up. So knowing all of that, I'm just curious as to how you're seeing the space as we're recording this now.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a few very key things that I like to talk to people about. Is do not try to time the market. It is a fool's errand. It is impossible to time the market. But what you can kind of do is you kind of average out the tops and average out the bottoms. And that's obviously one of the things that I talk about as well, is if you have a business model that you understand the mechanisms of the percentages that you're trying to buy on, and you can operate within there, the market's dynamics are not necessarily what drive those business decisions. And so that your business plan, and it might be, you might be an Airbnb person and you're doing an arbitrage on what you can sign leases for and what you can rent it out on a nightly rate. And so that's great. As long as your business plan works and you can move efficiently through making those decisions, I don't think the overarching economy or maybe a commercial real estate's assets value is going to be a major pro or con to what your business model is. So when I look at this in the current environment, is I use a lot of data. I determine and look at job growth, population growth, affordability indexes, and then kind of a catch-all of demographics. And so I am very, very bullish on markets first and foremost, is because there's something that's happening with a positive population increase and migration. And then I use some other things is I track infrastructure bond spends. So government's spending. And so there's really like a urban renaissance that's happening this country over, is that as maybe in the 80s and 90s, even some of the 2000s, there was a lot of downtowns that, for lack of a better word, had like a decline in population or white flight or something. And now they're like, hey, how can we make a better and building, as we were talking earlier about building communities, is they're like, we need to reinvest into the parks, or putting a new light rail, or putting transportation systems into that, improving the roads. And so when cities and municipalities and governments start doing that, that doesn't have the same traditional return on investment that a private developer would look at. But if they're putting $1 billion in a 4-block area from a new development, guess what? That is going to have a return on investment. And it might just be that 2-mile light or streetcar line has a benefit of all those assets on those particular line. And so that's where I get into understanding like where those things are happening. And then if there's this bigger kind of macro play of the market, is the momentum of a market does like about 80 or 90% of actually what the efforts are. It continues to go up. You see Charlotte do this to this to this. You almost buy anything in Charlotte 5 years ago, I don't care what you paid for the price of it. You're right. Doing all right. You could probably do a terrible job and still be okay because the market fundamentals move there. And so that's why I say first understanding the market. And then I am looking for good deals that are less than the intrinsic value. So when I say that is if it costs $200 a square foot to go build a building and you can buy it for $150 a square foot.
That's a win.
That becomes a win. And so then obviously understanding, because with commercial real estate is about what the rents it can generate. And a vacant commercial building is worth very little money, whereas in residential, a vacant residential building is worth a lot, or a house is worth more money because people have the freedom to move in or to buy it or rent it out and do those other things. And so you have this difference of a teeter-tottering is understanding how you're going to drive revenues on that commercial building. And if it's office, I don't know. That's like you just said, a area where maybe there's a lot of headwind and challenges as people start working in the metaverse, or as they start working from home remotely or whatever it is. But I was like, office, can you convert an office building to apartments? Well, that's a different story. Again, understanding.
That's an exciting space. But I'm curious about something. So you're in California and you're buying elsewhere. So how do you factor in the out-migration situation in California when you're looking at commercial properties in distress? Is there a point where you look at a market and say, I don't want to be involved in that right now? Because obviously part of the out-migration problem with California is their regulatory and legislative environment, which is pretty nasty to property owners on the whole. But obviously there's going to be a point at which it does make sense to buy in. So how do you evaluate a market like that? It's easy to say yes to Texas. It's easy to say yes to North Carolina. Why would somebody say yes to California in this space?
I have sold everything in California several years ago and have not done any, but I'm starting to look a little bit again because, California is a great place if you're parking capital as far as just as kind of a safety. And you actually have a lot of international money, Chinese money for years, Japanese money came into there. And I went to grad school down in Miami. And so deals were being transacted at 3 caps, years ago. And it was just it made no sense. Well, it was a German family office where they had a negative yield on their bank. They had a negative interest rate. So if you put money in the bank, you're losing money and you're like, yep, I'm losing money. And so to them, it's like a -1 versus a 3% return. They're like, that arbitrage between Chinese money and currency exchanges and other things really, really play out. So understanding who's buying, what are they paying for those? And then I think you had a perfect description of this is as in purgatory that commercial real estate is people just aren't transacting right now because the capital markets are
crazy,
haywire. You're not even sure what's going to happen. And then there's such what the buyers are willing to pay down here and what the sellers are willing to sell. There's such a huge gap between the two of them that just nothing is transacting right now. And so it's just kind of we're not sure what's going on. And so when I say that, is and why I think distressed is people do have motivation to sell sometimes is, maybe they're trying to preserve another asset that's actually doing really well. Maybe there's unfortunate, sometimes life gets in the way and there's divorces and there's medical issues, there's other things. And so that's why I say that intrinsic value, what are the sticks and bricks worth? And then when you're getting it at a certain amount of discount, California, it makes it very, very difficult to bring new product online. Mm-hmm. So then when you have and can buy existing assets and you can buy them at a discount, you can understand. And again, it has to do with what is your investment horizon? So people are like, hey, I want a good deal. And I go, well, is this in 6 months? You want to flip it in a year?
What's a good deal for you?
You're investing for the next 10 years? Are you investing for lifetime? I'm going to buy this and own this forever? Okay. And so all of those things factor into someone's decision-making process. And at least when I look at it, is this is 3-year money, 5 years money, 10-year lifetime. And I go, and those would then depend on what asset and what purchase price I would be willing to pay for a particular asset. And so California is doing an amazing job. Washington, New York, Oregon doing fantastic jobs of driving people out of California, New York, Washington, and they're driving them to these states like the Carolinas, to Florida, to Texas. They're driving them to those other things. It's just understanding where that net migration is going. And I just prefer to go get for new development or redevelopment on things that are easier to do instead of, and Warren Buffett talked about this, about comparing it to being an Olympic high jumper. To be an Olympic high jumper, you have to go clear 6 or 7 foot bars.
Mm-hmm.
You have to train, you have to eat right, you have to work out, you have to be a super efficient. And then you can clear this and be look, I'm an Olympic high jumper and I win gold medals. So, and I translate it's just I would rather just go find 6 1-foot bars that I can step over instead of one 7-foot bar that I have to train, and be amazing at. So again, that has to do with the market momentum and then the assets that just maybe other people aren't interested in. And for me, that tends to be in that maybe that $5 to $15 million price point, just because there's not a whole lot of competition. The institutional investors don't want to buy it. And then the mom and pop investors, it's a little bit too big for them sized out. And maybe that sometimes in some markets it's 3 million, some it's 5 or 10, but that kind of middle market price point, I have found that I've been the most successful because I get to kind of determine the right price that makes the risk adjusted return for what we plan on doing to it.
And by the way, if you ever want to know, friends, where you can figure out the out-migration, in-migration for a different area, you can always go to census.gov. There's a ton of data in there that will show you zip code by zip code where people are moving to and from. And you've got to be up to speed on that. Now, again, that data is only going to be good for a short while longer because the census only runs every 10 years. But as of right now, it's fairly reasonable. So it's good information to have. And also, your Chamber of Commerce will have a lot of this information because they know exactly which jobs are coming in and out. And what happens with jobs coming in and out is going to affect the commercial space and by default, the residential space. So, Jake, my whole show here is built on the crazy shit in real estate and the things you never expect to see or find out about. So I'm curious if you brought a little story for my listeners and viewers about something you've seen that you still can't believe you experienced in real estate.
I was like, well, I think the last 2 years have given me probably a lifetime worth of those stories that exist, because I was explaining this to someone. I was like, I feel like I'm playing a game of whack-a-mole with things that have never, ever happened before in the history or within a lifetime, all happening like multiple times a day. Like it was just like, so here's a commercial toilet flappers are unavailable. Manufacturing of those flappers usually, so Ferguson's is where we would get supply from the thing. And it'd be like, you just go down to Ferguson's and pick them up, and there was not ever, as in the 20 some odd years of doing this, there was ever an issue. But like now those things don't exist. And they're like, well, when are they going to get them back in? We like have no idea. And so then it's like, okay, that's not a big deal. Like whatever. Okay. Well, then it was like, well, that commercial toilets, are inspect to a certain configuration of the plumbing equipment and the plumbing layout. And so, oh, by the way, so you're like, well, let's just do a different toilet. Well, no, now you have to reconfigure the entire plumbing. And that's a $200,000 change order to reconfigure the plumbing to fit to this other manufacturer's or their proprietary layout. And so then you're like, now weighing some of these things out is like, how long do we just wait and hope that manufacturing capabilities come back online for flappers? Or how do we then exercise and move forward with a change order and a significant increase of cost to get something that's available or in stock? And we hope that it's in stock for right now. And so it's like that with transformers and PVC pipe. Yeah, and don't forget 4 times the cost of steel pipe. And you're just like,
well, remember, it's while you're dealing with code inspectors at the same time who may or may not understand the supply chain issues. And so there's also that human piece that's over there messing with the gears. And then PVC that situation has cracked me up because it was always a cheap option, but there's petroleum in PVC. So to the person who does not know, PVC has oil in it. And so you little environmentalist, you don't pay attention to what oil is in, but you couldn't get PVC. And then as the oil prices have gone up since 2021, it impacts the cost of PVC. Everything is intertwined. And I love that you mentioned that because for the last 2.5 years, it's exposed how much we are reliant on other countries for manufacturing, how much we're reliant on our core common raw goods that impact all these things. And frankly, a lot of us just had not paid attention for a long time. And I don't know about you, but I'm not going to forget anything from this era. And I've become really good at thinking differently when it comes to planning for properties. But also, you have to know how to talk to your inspectors now in a way you didn't have to talk to them 5 years ago.
Spot on. And I think obviously, and I have a bigger macro thesis that's looking at this is playing and moving forward is I think North America and South America are going to have to become a lot more friendly moving forward, because I think there's going to be additional east to west political pressures. And as China and Russia
about the BRICS, we're not going to be in that coalition. And that's a real thing.
Yeah. So I think what's going to happen is Mexico is very, very well primed and positioned geographically. They have both coasts. They have a better infrastructure systems than most countries. They have some narco and criminal elements that they need to clean up to make more investments, but natural minerals and things like that in Chile and Peru and that exist, and lithium ion and other things, copper and silver, and all those are connected between North and South America. And so I think if you're looking at a bigger play, they're going to have to become friendlier. And that's obviously part of the reason why I'm also very, very bullish on Texas as well, is because I think a lot of those goods are going to come through Texas. And then and I think it was the Canadian Pacific Railroad made some agreement recently that will be running a major north-south corridor through Texas up through Central America, or the center of America, is to distribute these goods. And I think rails still make a ton of sense. And so if I was investing into the stock market, which I rarely do, it would be things like, infrastructure programs like the railroad, because they have a monopoly and it's very difficult to get new things approved in those infrastructure spends and to improve those. So that's why I think you're going to see more and more manufacturing happening in Mexico and the southern United States, just because we have to repatriate some of these things.
But we have to get the border under control first, or this is all for naught. And I think everybody with a reasonable amount of common sense knows that. But Jake, if anybody wants to follow up with you, learn more about buying distressed commercial properties, the book, the whole Jake Harris story, what's the best way for them to find you?
Catchknives.com is where you can find, where we put our newsletter out. We have some courses. You can buy the book there. And personally, my Instagram is jake.realestate, at jake.realestate. I was talking earlier, I was like, I'm on TikTok. I don't manage my TikTok page. So maybe I'll be dancing on there. Maybe I'm TikTok famous and I don't even know it. Yeah, maybe that is the case. YouTube, Jake Harris Real Estate, other things like that. I pop up on a lot of those particular platforms as well. So always happy to connect with people, talk real estate. It is like I'm a dancing monkey. You put a quarter in me and I bang my cymbals. Yeah, like let's talk real estate. Yay.
Because we're nerds. So there you go, friends. All of Jake's information, all the handles will be in the show notes for this episode. So you can go pick up a copy of the book or go binge on some of the information he's putting on the internet. Jake, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us a whole different set of perspectives and rabbit holes to send people down after they finish listening.
Yes, I'm happy to. Exactly that, rabbit holes. Those are the rabbit holes I've gone down, and it's really, really fascinating. If it's of interest to you, and so that's just where I scratch my own itch. So it's a pleasure to be on your show, Leigh, and to hear your perspectives on things as well. It is exciting.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Y'all say something nice about Jake in the comments, or let us know which part of our conversation you agreed with, disagreed with, which side are you on. And mainly make sure you subscribe so you can come back and visit us again, and we'll see you then. Okay, now don't forget to go try Follow Up Boss so that your business can continue to expand in professionalism, and then you can meet some more crazy people yourself. I really appreciate Follow Up Boss sponsoring this episode, but mainly I appreciate them for giving y'all double the free trial time with no credit card required. So make sure you go to followupboss.com/crazy and then let me know what you think. I'll see you guys next time. As always, I'm so super thrilled that you joined in for more crazy shit. And if you're a realtor, investor, inspector, lender, or just a regular human being who happens to have an unbelievable story that you need to tell the world about, or frankly, you just need to one-up the story you just heard, then make sure to DM me on Instagram at Leigh Thomas Brown, or tweet me at Leigh Brown, or frankly, any social network where you hang out. I'm there. And if you had some fun, then you totally want to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.